Hello, friends. Welcome back to another edition of our weekly NBA Insider video live stream notebooks right here on the one and only Bleacher Report app. And we thank all of our watchers and listeners on YouTube as well. My name is Jake Fischer, your resident NBA insider, and we have a ton of news and notes to get to from around the NBA, where we are still sifting through the early aftermath of the Dallas Mavericks parting ways with their former embattled general manager, Nico Harrison. Now, the Mavericks continue to evaluate what this group, as in their roster, looks like under the co-interim general managers of Michael Finley and Matt Riccardi. There is an ongoing search from Patrick Dumont and his ownership group that is also involving Mark Cuban in some capacity now, in terms of looking at other potential incoming new lead executives, where one name that we've written about at the Stein line, my joint Substack effort with the Hall of Famer Mark Stein himself, the Dallas legend himself, has been Dennis Lindsay, who has a past experience with that organization before leaving to join Trajan Langdon as the de facto number 2 with the Pistons. But you see it right there. The big question with Dallas, and something that could ultimately loom the largest as probably maybe the best potential player to reach the trade market this winter, could very well be Anthony Davis, who, as shocking as Luka Doncic being traded out of Dallas was, it was equally shocking, a little bit less shocking, but almost as shocking, that the Lakers would part ways with Anthony Davis. He was not someone that the league was anticipating would become available, because if healthy, Anthony Davis has the capacity and the ability to swing the title race, particularly in the Eastern Conference, if he were to be one of the all-stars that migrated away from the loaded West out East, to where the fact that Boston is without Jason Tatum, the fact that Tyrese Halliburton is without Indiana, that the East is considered wide open, where teams from Detroit to anyone else can win a couple of games in a row and find themselves at the top of the conference right now. The Toronto Raptors are currently the 2 seed in the West at this juncture. So with all that being said, the Mavericks, though, they are not going to be moving Anthony Davis from a position of weakness. And if we want to read through the tea leaves and parse through what this Mark Cuban interview with The Athletic suggests, to me, this was a public posturing of sorts from Cuban to get the messaging across that Dallas is not just going to be moving Anthony Davis for pennies on the dollar. They are not going to be willing to enter the trade market from a position of weakness. So whether it's Anthony Davis, whether it's Kyrie Irving, whether it is anyone else on this Mavericks roster, from Derek Lively to Daniel Gafford, who have all been experiencing injuries to the point where the Mavericks, people were wondering if they would be eligible for a hardship exception now that Dante Exum is out for the season as well. All of these pieces, now Lively, I'm not expecting Dallas to really consider trading, but all of the Mavericks pieces, I think Dallas wants to be patient, and they want to really start their conversations in earnest around the league once they've got Anthony Davis back healthy with a strong sample size. We're going to talk about this more over the course of the next 2 months between now and the trade deadline, but we are going to need to see Anthony Davis have a pretty significant stretch of healthy, dominant two-way play in order for the trade market to really pick back up, because he is someone who has a very long history of missing games due to injury. That was one of the original critiques of Dallas's return for Luka Doncic, in that they did not just trade him for something short of what the ultimate offer could have been from the Lakers, but that they moved him for a player with such an extensive injury history like Anthony Davis has. And that has continued to be the case for Davis with the Mavericks, where he played just one healthy half before everything crumbled last season. And he's obviously missed approaching 10 games now with his latest calf injury. Now, the chat has been popping off about news from my friend Kelly Eco at Yahoo Sports about LaMelo Ball being increasingly frustrated with the organization and being open to a trade. I was making some calls about this earlier today. No disrespect to Kelly and my old shop. I think this is incredibly premature. I think absolutely. I mean, I heard it multiple times today from rival team executives. Just like we're talking about Anthony Davis and who could potentially be on the market, the league is hoping and waiting to see whether 1, 2, or 3 of Ja Morant, Trae Young, or LaMelo Ball will become available for trade. And that's teams, as I'm seeing it in the chat right here from Trey Spacios, teams like the Houston Rockets who need point guard help, teams that are going to be looking and at least inquiring about improvements at the point guard position, lead ball handlers, lead creators, pick and roll playmakers that are going to be calling Charlotte, that are going to be calling Atlanta about Trae Young, that are going to be calling Memphis about Ja Morant as well. I can tell you with absolute certainty that the Hornets are not actively looking to move LaMelo Ball anytime soon, and that everyone involved in this situation, from LaMelo Ball himself to Hornets executives to people on that coaching staff, just like other teams that have been depleted due to injury right now, they want to see what this group could look like with Brandon Miller actually in the fold, with a full lineup, especially with Conca Nipple being an immediate sniper right away. So, yes, rival executives are absolutely believing and preparing for a potential LaMelo Ball trade candidacy before the February 5th trade deadline. But LaMelo Ball is not asking out, to my understanding, and the Hornets are not actively looking to move him by any stretch right now. So, again, I will say I was making calls on this earlier today, so I understand why this report has surfaced, because I'm certainly hearing it too. That LaMelo is being mentioned right alongside Trae Young and right alongside Ja Morant as potential top-level point guards that rival teams are hoping and expecting their incumbent teams to be willing to engage on between now and February. But Dancing Beatles saying Bulls, trade him to the Bulls. I don't think the Bulls are really calling Charlotte right now. Could the Rockets pull it off? M. Weber 98 wants to know. The Rockets have Fred VanVleet's $30-ish million salary and other salary on the roster to go out and make a move like this. But I think with Houston, the most important piece to consider with any Rockets upgrade at point guard or just addition at point guard being that they lost Fred VanVleet to the year of the torn ACL. Ime Udoka, the head coach of the Rockets, who is a very powerful voice in that leadership structure, values defense, especially at the point of attack. And that's why the Rockets went out and targeted Fred VanVleet however many years ago when they wanted him. All three of those names we just mentioned, Trae Young, LaMelo Ball, Ja Morant, are not that type of defensive hound in addition to the playmaker that they are on the offensive side of the ball. Hayden says, in all honesty, who actually can get him and who has the capital to trade for him? The teams that have all the capital out there are the same teams, right? It's Utah that has tons of picks. You know, Atlanta does have an interesting position. San Antonio has an interesting position of draft capital. But again, I don't think right now anyone is putting out their full trade offer for LaMelo Ball at this juncture that they would if he was healthy and performing, just like Anthony Davis, because he has his own inconsistencies of availability when it comes to health and longevity. So I think for now, that's another big piece of this puzzle as well. Just like with Dallas, Charlotte is not just going to be selling off of LaMelo Ball for as quickly as they can. They're going to want to be operating from a position of strength, and they're going to want to see him healthy consistently, and they want to see their other players, their other blue chip prospects like Brandon Miller next to him for an extended period of time before they actually were to do something consequential. Sacramento could absolutely be doing something consequential as they are continually mired in a tough start. 3-12 on the year under first-year head coach Doug Christie, and the vibes are low. The vibes are low right now. Whoever keeps asking me, I can't read the username, Father Jake, about the Bulls. There's not much about Chicago right now aside from just enjoy the Vucci main game winners. That's all I got for you. In Sacramento, where the new look Bulls, they are running, of course, the Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan pairing that did not work long-term in Chicago. It's not exactly a surprise. Thank you for the nice stash comment. It is not exactly a surprise that Sacramento running back the Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan pairing with a center in Domantas Sabonis, similar to Nikola Vucevic, who is not a defensive anchor, not a rim protector, not a switchable five-man who can hedge out on pick-and-roll ball handlers and keep guys contained in space. This is not a surprise. We're definitely going to write about this more at the Steinline in the coming days and weeks. We're going to be talking about Sacramento more in the coming weeks on this live stream, being that the Kings are definitively in a position where they need to look to tear this thing down, and they need to look at a rebuild because they do not have even someone of a LaMelo Ball caliber, of a Conca Nipple caliber, of a Brandon Miller caliber. Keegan Murray, for all of his strengths and for the 5-year extension that he signed this fall, he is not a lead initiator. He is not someone that's a fulcrum of an offense. As great of a two-way player as he is, as great of a shooter as he is at 6'9" and able to defend, he's not a number one option, maybe even a number two option, maybe even number three option definitively on a good team right now. So for Sacramento, the biggest issue that they're going to focus on, that they're going to face for Sabonis, for Zach LaVine, for DeMar DeRozan, for Dennis Schroeder, maybe less so for Schroeder, but with those big three, Sabonis, LaVine, DeRozan, is what really is the value out there for those guys. Because LaVine was on the block in Chicago for years, and Sacramento was really the team that wanted him the most. Vivek Ranadive is credited specifically, the owner there in Sacramento, for targeting and wanting Zach LaVine. They gave him an offer sheet in free agency years prior, but there was not a lot of interest in Zach LaVine around the league. So now you're going to face the opportunity to trade for him where he has a player option ahead of next season, just like Trae Young, and could easily test the market. So you're not necessarily getting a player that has long-term money. DeRozan's deal at the $25, $27 million ballpark makes it a lot more palatable. But I think for all these guys who are making $40+ million, it's going to be harder and harder to move that major salary in today's second apron cap landscape. And no matter what, Sacramento is going to be a main fixture in the conversation of this trade market. But for now, I'm getting the sense from talking to rival teams and other executives that the market is going to be very cool in terms of how much value those guys can bring back for the Kings. But that might not matter at the end of the day because they are absolutely a team that could stand to rebuild and is, in my understanding, leaning that direction after just an incredible turn of events, from trading Tyrese Halliburton for Sabonis and having that whole light the beam season that was magical in 22-23 with him and Fox, and losing Fox, and now here they are 3-12 with definitely massive expectation around the league that Sacramento is going to be right there with Dallas as one of the clear sellers of this trade deadline. The Lakers, I think, are in a position to be buyers. We come to you today on Thursday, November 20th at 5:15 Eastern time now, with the Lakers 11-4 and vying for home court advantage in the Western Conference first round, just like last year. But today also news broke of the Lakers making sweeping changes to their front office. Out are Jesse and Joey Buss and much of the scouting staff as well, which fell under those brothers' scope and leadership for a very long time now. It's interesting, being that of any criticism you can make of the Lakers as an organization, they've actually drafted quite well. And they've identified undrafted players such as Austin Reeves and Alex Caruso before him quite well. So this is not necessarily on merit, but it does come after years of power struggle between the Buss brothers and their sister Jeannie Buss, who has run point on the organization ever since their father's passing. And now, of course, they sold for a record $10 billion valuation to Mark Walter. And people around the league have been preparing for some type of front office changeover in this organization, similar to what happened under this ownership group when they took over the Los Angeles Dodgers across the city. So what can come from here? And actually, we are getting news right now too that Domantas Sabonis has a partially torn meniscus, and he's going to be really evaluated in 3+ weeks. So that's going to be another monkey wrench in the trade value for the Kings. What teams could be interested in Sabonis, to get back there from Churro 916 LTV? I don't have definitive answers for that at this juncture, because he's got $40+ million on the books. He has been a defensive liability. And to my understanding from talking to people around the league, he needs to be maximized playing next to another rim protecting and floor spacing big man. And there are a few of those guys. Someone posited to me, like, could Miami be interested putting him next to Bam Adebayo? That's not to say here and report that Miami has interest in Sabonis. It's just that is the type of front court pairing, someone like Miles Turner, someone like Jaren Jackson, that the good majority of people I've spoken to in the league believe that Sabonis would need next to him in order to thrive. Flamingo Boy 07Z says Vivek needs to sell. I'm not here to tell a billionaire what to do, but there's absolutely been a checkered history of this ownership group ever since Vivek Ranadive's stewardship. Klein wants to know, can the Lakers trade for Gafford? And that is a great question, because while DeAndre Ayton has definitely been performing, I think, above some people in Los Angeles' own operations expectations, and he's fit in better than I think people anticipated, the Lakers are still undoubtedly going to be looking for long-term pick and roll lob threat pairings for Luka Doncic and also for Austin Reeves, but particularly for Luka Doncic. And who better to go after than someone who had massive success alongside of Doncic in Dallas, where they made the finals together, and his contract is quite manageable to trade for compared to a Sabonis at $40 million, for example. Gafford, off top of mind, is more in that 18 range, I want to say. He signed a contract extension, $354, $18 million, that specifically allows him to be eligible to be traded this year. They avoided the 6-month trade restriction that would have made him not eligible to be traded. So that was a very important detail. And even before this year went completely haywire for the Mavericks, they made that extension to keep open that flexibility and that optionality for him to get dealt. So you have to believe, you have to just know that when the Lakers are making their list of lob threat big men to potentially go out and acquire, the guy that helped Luka get to the conference finals and then the finals 2 years later is going to be right at the top of that list. Now, we've also heard for some time now that the Lakers know they need some improvements on the wing as well. And Andrew Wiggins has been a name that they are monitoring if Miami were to make him available. But I think those are the two spots that the Lakers are going to really be looking at on the trade market here. They're going to be looking at lob threat big men and two-way wings. So what type of outgoing salary could that mean? I mean, they have a good chunk to combine Rui Hachimura and Gabe Vincent in the event that they do see someone they identify and want to go target and add. But I think at this point in time, 11-4, LeBron just came back. The Lakers are still going to also be in a little bit of a wait and see mode, see what this group really looks like, see what the context is before they really push their chips in and make some type of move. But I do anticipate, as long as the Lakers keep winning at this clip and keep shaping into a team that looks to have a real shot at challenging the Oklahoma City Thunder in the Western Conference, because don't get it twisted. No matter how well Denver has played, Houston has played, the Lakers have played, this is the Thunder and everyone else. The Thunder are 15-1 and still haven't had Jalen Williams back in the fold. So that is the ultimate context and barometer for all these teams. How good can they be in comparison to OKC? And I think that's also a driving factor in why the Lakers have identified two-way wing as a role and a position that they could stand to benefit from, being that that's what OKC is loaded with. Of course, they've got Hartenstein and Chet in the front court, but they're loaded with two-way wings and plenty of ball handlers. And we are going to talk about how just absurdly beneficially they are positioned at the end of this show. What a team that is not absurdly positioned for the long term or the near term are the New Orleans Pelicans, who are 2-13 as of this recording today, and they've made the only coaching change so far of this season. Of course, Dallas, as we talked about to lead the show, changed direction with their lead executive, but the Pelicans moved on from Willie Green after 5 years with the team in favor of interim head coach James Borrego. So this is a new iteration of this organization with Joe Dumars in place of David Griffin, with James Borrego in place of Willie Green. And now Zion Williamson returned last night for the first time. And we got our first taste and our first option of Derek Queen next to Zion Williamson. And it was interesting to see the type of playmaking at that position next to Zion and what that could ultimately look like. We've seen Zion paired next to Steven Adams and Jonas Valanciunas and Yves Missi, but we've never really seen him with a true playmaking big man like Derek Queen has so far already translated into being. The cost of that, of course, though, was sending out the unprotected potential pick of New Orleans or Milwaukee, where right now, if the season ended today, the Pelicans would be sending their own pick to Atlanta, which they moved to get Derek Queen. That would have the tied for the best chance of the number one overall pick at 14% with the Wizards and the Pacers, which is not an ideal scenario, being that as good as Derek Queen is, I don't think anyone around the league right now believes that he's worth the number 2 pick theoretically in the draft, the number 1 pick in the draft, and the late first that the Pelicans traded to move up to get him as well from 23. So that cost is going to be very interesting to monitor, being that the Pelicans have some type of inclination to want to win. And There is some buzz about them potentially wanting to make some win now additional moves. But if it stays poor, if the Pelicans remain in the cellar of the Western Conference, absolutely teams are going to be calling about Trey Murphy. Teams are going to be calling about Herm Jones. Teams are going to be calling about Jose Alvarado. There's plenty of players on this roster that will have a lot of interest if the Pelicans do decide to be a seller. And all this and what the ultimate fate of this team is going to be a major implication of James Borrego's chances of keeping this job as well. We are already hearing names from Darvin Ham to Kevin Ollie to the Orlando Magic head coach Jamal Mosley, who is obviously still employed by the Orlando Magic. But those are three names that are already out in the ether as guys that New Orleans and their Joe Dumars-led organization with Troy Weaver as his executive vice president are interested in considering for their head coaching position long term. So this is kind of a whole trial over the next 70 games for what James Borrego can do with this roster, particularly with Zion Williamson healthy, with Derek Queen putting up 30-point near triple doubles on a nightly basis right now. What all that can look like as we get closer to the trade deadline and what it could mean ultimately for the head coaching position long term here under a new leadership group that did not hire James Borrego initially. That was David Griffin. Back to the chat here. The Pels are weird because we haven't even seen DeJounte yet. That is true as well. DeJounte Murray, of course, is still recovering from a torn ACL himself. And you could look at him as some type of midseason addition that theoretically pushes New Orleans back up the Western Conference standings. They have 2 lottery picks right now that would get Nola back in the draft. I don't know where you're seeing New Orleans having 2 lottery picks because their picks are owed to Atlanta. So that, I'm sorry, Zeke 1534. Dancing Pearl said, could I see LaMelo to the Raptors for quickly? Again, I am not ready to give a lot of air to the LaMelo being available discussion. I think we are waiting to see what could really turn in that organization when Brandon Miller hopefully comes back, when this group is more intact. But it's definitely something that people are preparing for. Drew Jack 20N wants to know, or says he could see the Lakers going for Miles Bridges or Jeremy Grant. Absolutely. I think those are 2 names that could be right in the mix of the 2-way wing stuff. Miles Bridges, of course, is represented by Clutch. There's been a lot of synergy there with that organization in the past. And his contract is not nearly as burdensome as I think people would have thought once upon a time, where we are in the second apron era and $25 million a year now is, I'd say, kind of the going rate for a starter, and his deal declines. It goes down to 22.8 next year. So I think Miles Bridges will definitely be someone that teams are looking at, not just the Lakers as well. Our final topic here is that as incredible as the Thunder have had a start of this season, they are also incredibly positioned right now to potentially get 2 more draft lottery picks. Maybe that was what Zeke was saying in the chat. The whole league is rooting for the Los Angeles Clippers to step their game up, to have Kawhi Leonard get back healthy, because right now, and this has changed a bit since this tweet came up because the Clippers won a game, but right now the Thunder are projected to have the 9th pick from the Clippers, the 10th pick from Utah, the 16th pick from Philadelphia. So they could have 3 top 15 picks in addition to a late first rounder from Houston. So they are in a position to have 4 firsts and 3 of the top 15. While this team, of course, won the title and Jalen Williams still isn't back, and they're 15-1. So it's just an embarrassment of riches for OKC right now. And it's definitely something people on the league are talking about. I can tell you that. I can tell you Denver, Houston, the Lakers, Minnesota, They're all rooting for the Clippers. Win some games. Get Kawhi back. Do not hand OKC another top 10 pick. They're going to have 4 picks in 26. They're going to have 4 more in 27. They're absolutely loaded. So it is an embarrassment of riches right now for the Thunder. But ultimately, it's not really in their control. It's in the Clippers' control. The Utah, we fully expect to be in that mix. Philly, we expect to be pushing to be better. But the Clippers, a lot of attention is on how much better Los Angeles can get. That's going to do it for today's loaded show. We had a lot of news. We had a lot of notes. And we will have a lot more game action tonight, tomorrow, NBA Cup play back in the mix. And we are going to be off next week due to Thanksgiving. But we'll be back right after that in December, all the more closer to December 15th when trade season picks up in earnest, when all the free agents, most of the free agents who signed this past summer will become eligible to be moved. And we'll break it all down for you there once again, as always, right here on the Bleacher Report app. Thank y'all. See ya.